Welcome to Transform Now, the podcast brought to you by robotic process automation pioneer SS&C Blue Prism. Digital transformation has the potential to reshape the way companies service their customers, engage their employees, and manage their operations. Whether you're looking to develop strategies, tactics, or best practices to positively impact the future of work, or you're curious to see how other companies have successfully navigated their digital transformation programs, then this podcast is for you. We're here to help you transform now.
Hello, everyone. I'm Brad Hairston with SS&C Blue Prism. Welcome to the Transform Now podcast. Today, I'm thrilled to have as my guest, John deCraen, Associate Managing Director of Strategic Risk Consulting at the advisory firm Kroll. That's Kroll. John and I will be talking about how and why cybersecurity has become such a critical priority for all companies in the digital age. Welcome, John. Why don't you take a few moments to introduce yourself to our listeners before we dive in?
Happy to do it. Good morning, Brad. Thank you for the introduction and thank you for the opportunity to speak. John deCraen here, Associate Managing Director, as you said. I've been consulting for about 20 years. Most of that time, the last 10 years or so, of course, has been spent in the cybersecurity space. I have a background in digital forensics and e-discovery. I think you could say all things related to digital technology from a consulting perspective. Before that, I spent about 10 years in an IT organization helping manage super large data centers. So I have experience across the breadth of IT, whether that be big enterprise computing and storage to networking devices and pretty much all things enterprise and corporate computing. Grateful to be here.
I am grateful to have you here as well, John. And I didn't mention this in my intro, but John and I spent a little time together as colleagues at one of our consulting stops. And I have nothing but respect for his cybersecurity expertise. So you were the first person I thought of when the idea of a podcast focus on this area came up. That's for sure. John, the Wall Street Journal recently surveyed CIOs, and not surprisingly, cybersecurity was identified as a top priority for 2023. In fact, the journal made the mantra for this year, trust no one. So it's an area that affects all aspects of IT, including intelligent automation, of course. So I'm really glad to shine a light on this topic today. It's one that we haven't really delved into very much on the podcast. Why don't you start with this? How has cybersecurity as a discipline evolved in recent years?
I think it is changing with such trajectory. I think, if you look at the way we trained folks, even pretty recently, it was really focused on technically centric training courses, right? You took a training course in a particular, very centric topic on cybersecurity and you got a certification. You went out into the world and you practiced that very narrow skill set. And today we're seeing large universities offering cybersecurity degrees. And what that does, I think, is it translates into the idea that we're now training individuals to be leaders in cybersecurity, to recognizing the value of the entire program, the breadth of the program as a holistic principle and set of concepts. And we're just not focused any longer on having people skilled in very narrow cyber controls. I think it raises the bar and places the people in good positions to be good risk leaders, unlike very recently when people were just focused on the technology.
John, this brings to mind the latest World Economic Forum Future of Jobs report. It showed the top jobs in demand, and information security analyst was one of the top 5 fastest growing roles globally. There's just so much demand for this skill set. In addition, it's interesting to me, many are saying that bookkeeping and accounting jobs, as they become more and more automated, those skills have proven to be very convertible to cybersecurity skills. We'll see how that manifests itself in the years to come. What impact did the pandemic have on cybersecurity?
I think without a doubt, the unprecedented change is the work from home. Companies were used to spending the mass amount of their budget in brick and mortar network protections, firewalls, gateways, other technologies to protect the corporate office and everybody who worked within the corporate office. And most of the transition of data from one place to another all occurred within the corporate office. And then now all of a sudden they have to worry about these individual employees on their home network full time. Surprise is this massive disparity in technical savvy. People have open home networks that aren't managed in any way. This is obviously a terrible combination for corporate security. So this has resulted in pretty massive shift in strategies. Today we're focused on what's known as UEBA, behavioral analysis, right? Does the individual in the accounting department typically log in at 2 a.m? If they don't, and they see a login from this account at 2 a.m, raises a flag. Virtualization technologies, right? The desktop as a service, VDI technologies have become more ubiquitous than ever. Remote access protections. And I think as you came on, you were talking about the article you'd read, zero trust initiatives are really dominating our conversations. Trust no one, trust no connection, trust no computer. Make sure we're validating all of these connections every which way.
Yeah. Well, over the last few years, there have been a number of very, very public ransomware attacks, stuff that dominates the news headlines. Today, you don't seem to hear about these quite as frequently. At least that's how it appears to me. Is this because companies are doing a better job of mitigating them, or is it just because the media has lost interest?
I do wish it was because companies were doing a better job. Being in this every day and seeing the numbers just pile up really just makes me believe that the mainstream media is just not focused on them. They focus on massive losses and disastrous results. And when giant companies go down, the Uber CEO or CISO, the incessant humdrum of companies being ransomed every day, it's just not glamorous. I just don't think that it makes the news and the numbers that represent the real world. Just to be fair, though, there was a noticeable reduction in cyber events recently that I think can be attributed to real world geopolitical circumstances. But without a doubt, the criminals have bounced back. New tactics, new ransomware gangs. Ransomware is a service, right? Where you have lesser qualified, technically competent threat actors purchasing tools from ransomware gangs, right? So instead of having folks who are deeply involved in the development of ransomware tactics, they're now selling that to people who are lesser competent. And now pretty much anybody with the right amount of money and the connections can buy these tools and be a ransom threat actor. And that to me is scary. There's been a massive uptick recently where, Kroll is super busy. Kroll, as you probably know, is one of the world's foremost leaders in incident response, doing more than 3,000 incident responses a year. And we are seeing these trends pick up quite recently and with some ferocity. I just think that these ransomware things occur so frequently that the numbers are so appalling, they just get ignored. And also the tactics have changed, Brad. Instead of ransoming folks based on encrypting old machines in their network, ransomware gangs have changed their tactics. They're now just quietly taking all the data. They just exfil all of the data. And the ransom now is they threaten to go public with that data straight away, right? And you never knew they were there, right? When you get encrypted, a lot of bells and whistles go off. With the new extortion schemes, you don't even know they were there. They take the data, and the next thing you know, they're threatening to release the data to the public, and you have to make pretty serious risk decisions in a very short order. No, so the frequency is just as high, if not higher than ever.
In your work with Kroll, are there 2 or 3 industries where you have a lot more incidents, or is it really across the board in terms of types of companies that are having these attacks on a routine basis?
Ransomware gangs have specialties. There are also lots of threat actors out there that are opportunistic. They scan the internet for open ports, and when they find an open port, they pounce. So, good gateway security to those paying attention is really helpful. But you do have ransomware gangs that specialize. There's been a lot of media frenzy over the threats by some Baltic state ransomware gangs that were going to attack hospitals and healthcare systems specifically. So yeah, there is some specialization, healthcare, manufacturing. Of course, critical infrastructure is always a massive concern and falls within the top three year in and year out.
Hmm. John, do you find that most companies today have a CISO or a chief information security officer in place? Or does this also vary by industry or by company size, that type of thing?
Yeah. So just to be candid, I lead Kroll's virtual CISO offering. So I spend a lot of time in the CISO space and talking with companies about why they don't have one and why they should. I see this sort of real variance in the way companies stack technology leaders to deal with these cybersecurity issues. I think one of the things that I still can't get my head around is the approach that a CISO should be at the director level reporting to the CIO instead of at the VP level as an equal to the CIO. I think that it would be much more beneficial to organizations if they recognize the equilibrium between the CIO and the CISO. But I think today still, unfortunately, the massive organizations, especially the larger ones, so that they're difficult ships to steer, they still have a director level CISO or director of information security reporting to the CIO. Is a sort of mass amount of conflict of interest, as you might imagine, in that situation. And I think our industry is dragging folks as quickly as we can towards creating the equilibrium in the reporting relationship to the board and to the executive leaders between the CIO and the CISO. There are a lot of new regulations, some of them proposed, some of them passed. The SEC, the NYDFS had passed a lot of new boardroom level they haven't passed. They've proposed. There was a stay in that for more public scrutiny, but we expect them to be passed soon. These board level regulations are going to require a sea change in the way that executive leaders deal with this. And I think if you look at just the Uber CISO and the news about his conviction for his role in covering up the events that happened to Uber, I think are going to make a pretty big dent in the way companies are approaching this in the near future.
So just to be clear, do you think it's a recipe for disaster if a company asks their CIO or their CTO to also address information security as a part of their role?
Yeah, I think this will be unfavorable or unpopular with my CIO friends who listen to this, but I do think so. The conflicts are numerable, and in some cases they're insurmountable. I think the CIO's job, I mean, let's just face it, is delivering productive solutions, service delivery. And the CISO's job is full stop, make the organization secure. Those two are often incongruent, and the requirements of compliance and secure access, they often push service delivery in a direction that wasn't favorable to the CIO's mission. And there has to be this sort of juxtaposition between these two roles. Having somebody serving both those roles makes it extremely difficult to make good risk decisions. I live in a world of risk tolerance, and it is never the job of the technology leaders to be making risk decisions for the business. It should always be a straightaway business decision. When you have somebody in this sort of role of plurality, both in information technology and information security, it's easy to be in a position where you feel like you should be making risk decisions because you have responsibility for service delivery, and you may very well weigh service delivery over good cybersecurity. I just have seen it too many times. I don't know that I have numbers, but it definitely is a contribution to folks getting breached.
Okay. And I am sorry for getting you in trouble with your CIO friends with that question. John, are most companies today taking a more proactive approach to cybersecurity, or are a lot of them still acting more reactively? That is, they're just dealing with incidents as they arise.
I think, as you might expect, the answer is there's a massive mix. I see lots of companies, and I don't know if there's any attribution to large or small or revenue size or whatever. It is really about leadership. I see this sort of disparity between those organizations who, quote, get it, and are investing heavily in technology and people and defensive mechanisms, and those that have just decided that their risk tolerance model is to run the gauntlet and pay the ransom should it come about, right? The data that may be released is to them in their mind not offensive enough to warrant the spend on protecting that data. I certainly don't support that, but I see that. I've had organizations tell me, in the midst of a breach, well, we just decided we couldn't do that. We didn't have the money to do that. Well, they may have $1 billion in revenue. So is it real that they can't do that? It's a risk tolerance decision. Whether people are trained to recognize that or not, they're making those decisions. I think regulations, we just talked about the SEC and the DFS regulations, they're going to start to have a material impact. The boards are going to be held accountable. One of the proposed regulations is that the board have a cybersecurity expert. And of course, we'll have to wait and see how the SEC defines that. But I think that they're going to want the board to have somebody accountable for risk tolerance decision, and gone are the day that the CISO gets 7 minutes as a presentation to the board once a year. They're going to want material information with which to make these decisions. So regardless of what exists today, I see massive change coming for the way companies operate, especially those in two spaces, those that are public and those who hold investments or conduct other kind of investment financial transactions on behalf of investors.
Interesting. John, for quite a while, companies have been using a combination of automation and AI to understand threats, to constantly profile what is occurring in day-to-day business activities, and so forth. How is the advent of generative AI, which is all the buzz right now, how has that impacted cybersecurity?
I think its contribution has yet to be seen, but I think it's going to be massive. It's already had sort of measurable impact on security as a principle. I think concepts like SOAR, which is security orchestration, automation, and response, we've already seen it grow from fledgling beginnings and to now it's a real life protective and defensive tactic that we're starting to see organizations buy tools or build these things, create these big data lakes, and then put tons of analysis in front of that. Of course, SOAR was originally designed and will proliferate in the space of SIM analysis, right? Event correlation. It has the ability to get through threat actor trends and zero-day exploits and other persistent threats so much faster than a human developer can write filters, because it can use the term see the matrix. It can see this massive amount of data and it can see the smallest trend and begin to build heuristics on that so much faster than the human can. I think the field of vulnerability management is also ripe for contributions from AI, being able to replace situational attacks at speed and with variability that's just not comparable to the way that a human can do that or human built tools. Risk management, I think, has yet to really explore this, but I think risk management, quantification of risk will benefit immensely from AI. I think the Monte Carlo simulation is gone. It's a thing of the past, right? We're not going to be sitting there running 10,000 simulations over and over again. We're going to run 100 million. We're going to run 1 billion Monte Carlos in AI all at the same time and be making much better, much more informed risk decisions because of it.
Is it safe to say, as companies go more and more digital, that their cybersecurity strategy is going to have to change dramatically?
Yeah, indeed. I think, like probably have been said a bunch of times in history, the evolution of the revolution is now in full swing. We have companies committed to full digital records across healthcare and manufacturing, right? Where the Internet of Things, even jobs that were done by humans as recently as 2 years ago are now being replaced by robotics and these other things. So we're seeing full digitalization of organizations, the implementation of software as a service, SaaS, or infrastructure as a service, and other types of cloud hosted functions and solutions. It's exponential. That genie's out of the bottle. We're not getting that back. This is the way we will compute tomorrow. I think the idea of the big data center, long gone. will be moving everything into the cloud, their organizations. So we're fully cloud today. I mean, about half of my client base is nearly fully cloud today, dragging along some legacy software that they can't move, but are dying to move into the cloud. Net new cyber strategies have arisen from that. The zero trust, we talked about that. Desktop as a service, organizations giving clients or giving their employees either thin clients that don't do any computing on the desktop, or forcing their employees to use their own machines and then serving them virtual desktops. And they're free to do whatever they want on their local machine, but all computing will happen in the cloud on behalf of the corporation. I think that is right around the corner for most everybody. It's definitely in use today. Yeah. Lots of new frameworks, cloud architecture frameworks, cloud governance and compliance frameworks, and lots of new tools for monitoring.
Yeah, the cloud is definitely a huge trend. We're seeing that as well in our space. We're also seeing automation and AI come together in a pretty powerful and innovative way. For example, we have telco and utility customers that are using digital workers to take readings from IoT sensors in the field and then feed those readings into machine learning models, then act on the AI generated outputs or insights as they've been trained to do. So what are the implications for cybersecurity in that type of widely distributed, always on type of environment?
I think the most obvious correlation here to me is the endpoint detection and response sensor, right? There are a number of really great organizations who built pretty slick sensors that can see all things being committed, all things being computed on the local endpoint, and sending all of that data up to the cloud for AI and other type of filtering and correlation events occurring on that data, and being able to see not only block basic vulnerabilities, but being able to see, because threat actors are getting slicker as well, being able to see 0 days as they're occurring and seeing this persistent threat before it's even known as a vulnerability to humans, and be able to see that in real time. I think what you're going to see is a proliferation. Right now, those EDR tools, those sensors, can only see the ubiquitous operating systems, some flavors of Linux, all the flavors of Windows, on servers and on desktops. But I think you're going to see, using the concept of Internet of Things, these kind of sensors proliferating around the world for all manner of different types of computing platforms. Network technologies is next. Right now, there are tools that gather that data. But I think this sort of ubiquitous sensor becomes the new trend for the way that we monitor our devices.
Yeah. Okay. John, we all love a good story, and you're the kind of person in your career where I bet we could sit around and talk for hours about the customer situations that you've encountered, and they would, I bet, be shocking in terms of the degree in which companies have been attacked and so forth. Is there a story that you can share, protecting the client confidentiality, of course, but just to highlight how important it is to be buttoned up in this area?
I'll give you two. We need a lot more time. I'll give you two.
Okay.
The first is a rather large hospital. And it's one of those things where this happens to so many companies. They don't eat their dog food. They have policies, they have governance, tells them not to do the sort of anti-common sense things, but they do them anyways, right? They had some old servers and they had a budget constraint. They had a need for a new platform for a web service offering that they were going to put up. And they found an old server in a closet and decided that would be the machine that they would run this from. And without even a thought, they placed it in the DMZ and powered it up and gave it an IP address. And literally within a few moments, the entire world began to attack this machine, and all of the huge volumes of patient records were exfiltrated within a very short period of time. This, of course, was a massive breach of privacy and HIPAA rules and OCRs involved, and didn't have to happen. It's one of those things where like very small sort of amount of common sense could have prevented this massive release of private records. And then maybe the other one On the other end of the spectrum, I might share is a large manufacturer who, by all accounts, had a great backup schema. They literally backed up everything. They had system state data backed up. They had all of their file servers and all of their data backed up from all their applications. They did a great job of this, except for that they put it all on a production file server, used only Kerberos, used only a domain password to protect it. Well, the first thing the threat actor did when they made entry into the organization was delete all of those backups. And they spent, no exaggeration, months rebuilding the general ledger from emailed spreadsheets back and forth between the accounting department. Absolute nightmare. And that was just one of the many things that they had to rebuild from scratch. I mean, they had to build their entire business anew because they had no backups and the threat actor deleted everything. We see that a lot. Scary stuff. Immutable backups, one of my favorite words.
Wow, those are frightening stories. I knew you would be able to pull out a couple on demand like that because you're dealing with this stuff over and over and over. Well, John, as we wrap up, what is your advice to the C-suite with regard to cybersecurity and for those particularly that maybe aren't elevating it to their list of top priorities? How do you advise companies in that realm?
I think the first thing is stop pretending it won't happen to you. Right? Even the most well-protected organizations that spend multiple millions of dollars on their cyber program are getting breached. Ransomware, it only takes one employee clicking on one link in one email, right? We're seeing lots of phishing. I think that's the glamorous thing that the media likes to talk about, but it's true. It's a massive plurality of percentage of attacks begins at the phishing level. These protections are important, and my job is to help companies institute better protections when they don't know better. But I think people forget the basics, the blocking and tackling, the detection and response. If I had two areas that I asked executives to focus on, while protections are great, and I certainly insist that we have protections in place, the detection capacity and capabilities and your ability to respond, right? The second antidote I gave you earlier about the manufacturing company, if you can't restore, you have no hope of recovering from an event. So if we already have established that everybody's going to get breached eventually and you're unprepared to restore, you have lost before you've begun. If you can't defeat the attacker and you get breached, none of the money you've spent on gateway protections and phishing campaigns and split training materials, none of that will matter because you don't have the ability to recover. Like I said a moment ago, immutable backups, capturing system states. I see oftentimes folks will say, yes, we have a breach, but we have all of our data backed up. And I'll say, well, what about that legacy operating system and all of its very precarious configurations that you've accumulated over the last 15 years? That Windows 2000 machine, right? The proverbial ghost in the closet. Can we restore that? Well, we didn't capture that operating system as part of our backup. And now the guy who built it, Fred, he's been gone 15 years. Nobody knows how to rebuild the machine. And so guess what? Now you have all this data that you can't access. So you got to pay a consultant to normalize the data, to analyze it, and rebuild it in some new system. Giant waste of money and time. Homogeneous desktops. I see often all too well folks saving their data to their local desktop, and then the desktop gets encrypted. You're forced as an organization to pay massive ransom to get a desktop back, right? I say that with some tongue in cheek because it's unforgivable to me that in today's age, we're letting folks save stuff to the desktop. Get that stuff into the cloud, right? The OneDrives, the Google Suites, get that stuff into the cloud, get it off the desktop, make the desktop homogeneous. It's our entry point only. And then my sort of most important principle that I tell all of my customers, that noisy networks are safe havens for threat actors, right? We want to make our networks quiet. We want to standardize everything. We want to create consistencies and force that threat actor to make noise when he has an activity on the network. Make his activity the anomaly so that we can see it and you'll have a much better chance of defending yourself.
Well, John, in the intelligent automation world, we talk a lot about resilience and continuity and helping companies, helping our customers respond in real time to changes in the business environment. Having the appropriate cybersecurity strategy and approach is absolutely a part of that. Thank you so much for being here to educate us and challenge us on this topic. It was a real pleasure to have you, and I wish you the best.
Thank you, Brad. The pleasure was all mine. I enjoyed being here.
Thanks for tuning in to Transform Now. For more insightful discussions on digital transformation and more, check out our podcast channel where you'll find all of our previous episodes. And to make sure you never miss an episode, subscribe to the show on your favorite podcast player. And if you like what you've heard, please leave us a review. For more information about digital transformation and the future of work, check out blueprism.com to learn how SS&C Blue Prism's digital workforce is enabling enterprise transformation now.